All throughout New Zealand, also, as a consequence of movements made at the end of, not end of last year, the end of the year before that, 2023, I think it was, there was a move to fluoridate drinking water throughout New Zealand. Now, fluoridation has been a hot topic on fluoridation of water supplies for an awfully long time. Goes back to God even before me being mayor. And there have been obviously those folk who have regarded fluoridation of water supplies, particularly municipal water supplies, as mass medication, but as also dangerous and injurious to the health of certain groups of people who might live in the communities. Others, from a scientific and certainly from a dental background, have argued the exact opposite, and that's been a live topic, which has to a large extent been left to councils to sort out for themselves. I can tell you in Whanganui, for example, we actually had a referendum on it. 20 years ago it would have been now. We had a debate, and and Whanganui residents voted to keep fluoride out of the water supply. And that was a decision that was being made by district and city councils throughout the country. But as a result of, I think, legislation that went through prior to the advent of this particular government, it was under the last Ardern-Hipkins administration, public officials or health officials were given the opportunity to demand that certain territorial authorities lose that right and that they mandatorily fluoridate their water, particularly areas which might be considered to be, socially disadvantaged, and where there were dental issues identified, particularly amongst the most disadvantaged groups of those communities. Well, one of those particular areas has been Whangarei, where it still seems there's a pretty active argument about whether or not the fluoridation of the municipal water supply should go ahead. And we're joined to talk about that specifically by the Mayor of Whanganui, Vince Cocurullo. Gosh, I hope I've got that right. Whangarei. Vince joins us now. Vince, thank you so much for joining us. Listen, mate, I'm very sorry about pronunciation. I'm appalling at it. Have I got it right? Cocurullo.
Well, I can tell you now, I've heard various iterations of it, so don't worry, it's okay. Mayor Vince is what most people end up with because they
Mayor Vince will do me.
Name.
Yeah. It's originally Italian, is it?
It is indeed. My family originally came from Piana di Sorrento, which is the Valley of Sorrento in the Amalfi Coast in Napoli.
Oh, that's lovely. And, how long have they been here?
Yeah, beautiful. My grandfather moved here, would have been about between 1910 1920, and he originally was down in the Hawke's Bay area doing the vineyards down there, and then became a railway tapper and moved up to Whangarei.
Oh, yes, because the Italians started, or were quite prominent in starting vineyards in this country, and in Hawke's Bay as well.
Yes.
Oh, gosh.
A beautiful area, and my grandfather was one of the ones who originally came up with the idea of splitting the grapevine so that you could actually have picking on both sides, so you actually have it in a Y shape rather than just the straight one line.
Yeah. Oh, very good. Oh, well, thank you for that, can I say. It's a marvellous legacy the Italians have left us. Hey, listen, mate, the reason I've got you on the show today is over the holiday period, a New York Times, and it was a result of American studies, suggested that all was not necessarily right in the area of fluoridation of water supplies, and that there was evidence to suggest that there might be, some legitimacy to those who object to it. My understanding, though, is that along with Tauranga, Whangarei has still got a pretty active view on whether or not you should be allowed to decide for yourselves whether or not you're going to fluoridate your water supply. Have I got that right?
Yeah, you're pretty much absolutely right, Michael. We've gone through that debate, and unfortunately, like your council originally when you were in Whanganui, 2002 was when we did our referendum, and which came up very clearly to not fluoridate. And now we're in a situation where it's been, I'm going to use the word dictated by the Director General of Health to only, they have the only ones who have the say.
Now, okay, have they told Whangarei that you must fluoridate your civic water supply, have they?
That is correct. They have specifically itemised Whangarei out as one of those councils that must fluoridate their water.
And presumably that's because you've got a high level of disadvantage and a large number of people with, what is the argument, with dental cavities and the like?
Well, that's the argument that they've used. I questioned them, and I threw the question back to them saying, well, have you got any data on that for Whangarei? And they said no. I said, okay, so you're basing this on other areas of New Zealand? Yes. Okay, so when it comes to fluoridating water, because the whole purpose of it is about tooth decay, and I said, well, what evidence do you have of the people who actually have tooth decay actually drink water? Because one of the biggest issues I know in Northland is there's a lot of people who do not drink water and they solely drink fizzy drinks and all the rest, and there is a high level of tooth decay. So how can you justifiably say, throw something into the water to fix that problem?
That's an interesting concept. I hadn't even thought of that until you raised it. So you're suggesting that those lower socioeconomic, more disadvantaged kids that would normally have significant teeth decay, that is as a consequence of not drinking water at all, of doing the fizzy drinks, as you've just suggested.
Well, I'm saying from the evidence that I have, there's a high proportion of that. Now, I haven't seen all the data. All I've seen is what some of the dentist people talk to me and tell me, and it really does come back to is oral hygiene is your number one thing. Getting kids to learn how to brush their teeth, actually getting them to drink water rather than drinking fizzy drinks these are all perfect ways of actually solving the problem. Adding fluoridation is not, in my mind, not the best way of... It's like hitting a tack with a sledgehammer. Why would you do it?
Okay. So you had a referendum yourself, some 20-odd years ago in Whangarei. Have you had one? Have you had a public opinion polling surveys since then?
We have had a survey. It's not a referendum in any shape or form. It didn't give conclusive evidence. What it came back to is roughly 50-50, and I do say roughly, because it was only of 600 people. So you really can't call that a very reliable source of information. And it was it's loose. The other bigger issue of that is when you look at the cost side of things. We've had to beg and borrow from central government 4.5 million to be able to add the plants in place, and we've got to do another 1.5 to add on top of that, and then top of all of that, we have an additional $100,000 every year to add to more costs, which we realistically don't have to do at this present moment. So it's quite frustrating on that.
All right. Are you given a time frame in which you must fluoridate your water supply in Whangarei?
Yeah, it's given to the end of March. So I think it's the 28th of March.
And if you don't, what are the consequences?